Well, we're now less than 2 weeks away before the end of the so-called 30-day pause, 13 days to be exact, before broad-based U.S. tariffs are expected to take effect against Canadian goods. 25% on most Canadian products imported by the United States, 10% for Canadian energy, all scheduled to start according to Donald Trump on March the 4th. And then on March the 12th, another 25% on top of the previous tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. As a result, we have seen a flurry of political activity taking place south of the border as Canadian leaders try to dissuade U.S. counterparts from supporting the duties. The Premier of the Northwest Territories has taken part in those efforts, and we're now joined by Premier R.J. Simpson. Premier, good to see you again. Thank you for making the time.
You as well, Michael, anytime.
Listen, a week ago I was speaking to your colleague, Premier Fury from Newfoundland and Labrador, and he told us that he was discouraged by the talks in Washington last week, discouraged that the White House officials that you and he met with said Donald Trump was not joking about making Canada the 51st state. I'm wondering what your reaction was to that revelation, to hear that statement in the U.S. Capitol from our closest neighbor and ally.
Well, I went down there wanting to hear what they had to say and seeing if what we're hearing and what we thought was accurate and what they're actually saying on the ground. And it is. I mean, what President Trump is saying on Twitter, in media interviews is the same things that we heard at the White House. And so, I didn't expect that there would be any more additional information or anyone to tell us, no, he's just joking, or any nuance added to that. And so, what we heard was a repetition of what has been said publicly. And I guess, I wasn't necessarily shocked by it because I've heard the President of the United States say those things publicly. And so I think the moment of shock had passed by then.
Yeah, it passed, although, it is a clear indication that this administration makes light, does not respect the sovereignty of Canada. So I wonder then, as you're making these efforts south of the border, how hopeful are you that any lobbying in the United States can result in Canada getting any type of respect and also getting the acknowledgement that this bilateral relationship is important and beneficial for both sides?
Well, I think lobbying alone won't do it. That is an important aspect of it. And this isn't the only time that the premiers have gone forward and spoken to Americans. The premiers from across Canada have been meeting with governors, with senators, with congresspeople for months now. So this was a trip to Washington to, show some unity and also get in the ears of even more people who have the president's ears. So I don't think that the lobbying alone will do it, but it will definitely help. We need to inform the people on the ground of the United States what's actually happening, because if they're being informed by what the president is saying, then they're not being very well informed, because a lot of that information is not necessarily very accurate. But the lobbying is one part, and the other part is the counter tariffs that the federal government has spoken about. So once those are, if they have to be put in place, there are going to be impacts on governors, on senators, on congresspeople who are feeling the economic impacts in their jurisdictions. And then they're going to be going to the president and putting their own political pressure on them. And so it's a combination of efforts that we're using.
Oh, so a combination of lobbying along with countervailing tariffs. But from the conversations you've already had with governors, with U.S. senators and other politicians, have you received any encouraging words, any assurances that people are willing to speak up for Canada and the importance of this relationship?
Canada has a lot of allies in the United States. So that was the one encouraging thing about this trip, is that, we spoke to a lot of people, and whether or not they speak out publicly, there's a broad recognition that tariffs will hurt the economies of both countries, that jobs will be lost on both sides of the border. And so there is that awareness and there is that support, and people are worried about the impacts in their states, in their communities. And those are the kind of things that get people motivated to put political pressure on the president.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how you, as a leader of a territory, are preparing your jurisdiction for these tariffs that will be coming from the United States.
So we don't do a lot of trade with the United States. We're one of the two jurisdictions in Canada, actually, whose biggest trading partner isn't the United States. We are a big producer of diamonds globally, and those get shipped to Belgium and other places. Eventually, they make their way into the United States, but we don't ship directly. However, we do have a lot of resource potential, and we are a resource-based economy. And so we have critical minerals And some of those potential mines have actually attracted investment from the federal government. So what we need to do in the territory is ensure that we have an inviting climate for investment and for business, so that we can get those critical minerals out of the ground and contribute to our own economy, but help build Canada's industrial base. That's one thing that we really need to do, I believe, going forward, is look after ourselves here. We can no longer rely on the United States. So we need to look at ensuring that we're getting the minerals out of the ground, we're refining them in Canada, and we're manufacturing in Canada, and hopefully manufacturing products that were designed and developed in Canada. We have the resources to do that. And while it's not a short-term fix for tariffs, it is a fix in the medium and long term, and I think we need to do that as a country, and we're going to play our part.
Mm-hmm. You just made a profound statement, and you're not the first to say it. We can no longer rely on the United States. So you mentioned critical minerals, as well. N.W.T has direct access to the Northwest Passage, which the United States has eyes on as well. So what do you need from Ottawa, from the federal government, to help the Northwest Territories, but also help Canada to ensure that the sovereignty of the territories and the Canadian North are assured?
So what we need are investments in the North. We need the same types of investments in infrastructure that have been seen in Southern Canada and have existed in Southern Canada, sometimes for well over 100 years. We have limited roads in the Northwest Territories. Similar to somewhere like Nunavut, we are not connected to the continental power grid. And so these are basic things that are needed to ensure that in terms of mineral resource extraction, that companies can go out and do exploration and then ensure that it's economical to actually get those resources out of the ground and to market. So we need basic investments, the nation building investments that we talk about here in the Northwest Territories year after year after year. And so it's good to see that Canada is finally paying attention to that and recognizes that without those investments, we are not allowing ourselves as Canadians to tap into one of this country's greatest resources.
Mm-hmm. Paying attention, as you say, any guarantees that they will be pursuing investment?
Well, I mean, we're in an interesting time right now where we have the Prime Minister stepping down, a number of individuals running for Prime Minister, and then a general election, soon after, I'd imagine. So it's hard to get any commitments out of Ottawa right now, but there's definitely a lot of support nationwide. I see publicly their support from the other premiers. I feel a lot of support, and so I'm confident that any incoming government is going to have to look at this situation seriously and look at their investments in the North seriously.
Well, without a doubt, we'll be speaking soon in the weeks to come. But for now, Premier Simpson, thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.